What's going on, party people? I hope you are having a wonderful night or day. Today we're back with some more Quinfall. This time we're getting to the fun part. This is where the fun begins. We're going to be talking about the 10 classes available in the game. I'm very glad that I waited until now to do this because I remember they were releasing them one by one. So this would be a comprehensive list of all the classes we'll see in the game, at least for now. And I really like what they're doing with this. It looks like each class will have 2 subclasses, so you'll have more to choose from. And each of the skills has different affixes you can specialize into, which is interesting as well. I'm going to do this nice and quick. The first one we're talking about today is going to be Archer. The Archer is a warrior class that effectively targets enemies from a distance and skillfully uses their arrows. They are able to strike enemies with critical blows and are often fast and agile in battle. Archers are inspired by nature and often form a close bond with animals living in the wilds. This bond allows the use of animal companionship and natural abilities in battle. The first subclass is the Hunter. Hunters are a subclass of the Archer. They live in harmony with the forces of nature, and when using these forces in battle, they draw on the strength of a loyal beast and a loyal force. If there's anybody from the Quinfall team watching this now or in the future, I probably won't end up playing this class as the main one because there's already a couple others that caught my eye, but one thing I'd like to request or hope is actually a thing. I'm hoping that the subclass not only actually gets access to an animal companion, but also I'm hopeful that it is permanent, as in you can keep it out at all times. And it'd also be pretty cool if you could tame other ones. Yes, I'm talking basically a World of Warcraft hunter. Tame other ones out in the world and be able to name them, customize them, that sort of thing. Because I would say that if you're able to get those features in the game, you're going to have a lot of happy archers on your hand. Second subclass is a Critical Archer. Critical archers are a subclass of the archer class, carefully calculating each strike of their arrows. They aim sharply, dealing high damage to their enemies and making strategic shots. Both subclasses offer the players different playstyles and provide the opportunity to further customize the archer class. Players can choose one of these subclasses or mix and match the skills of both subclasses to suit their preferences in game strategy. Now I'm going to read off and list each of the skills, but I'd rather not go into the affixes just because there's going to be so many if I break it down like that, but I'll have them on screen so you'll be able to actually see them yourself. Also, it appears that the cooldowns and the mana point costs haven't been fully added yet, so just keep that in mind. I mean, I would imagine they haven't, but anyway. Another thing is I'm not sure which exactly of these fit into which subclasses, but these are what we have listed on the website. First skill for the Archer is Sharpshooter, deal 130% physical damage to the enemy. Area Arrow, deals 140% damage to the enemy, also deals 30% damage to enemies within 5 meters of the impact point. Eagle Strike, the fired arrow deals 80% physical damage to the enemy, while the eagle that follows deals 120% physical damage. Trap Retreat, place a trap on the ground and leap backwards. Enemies caught in the trap take 250% physical damage and are stunned for 1 second. Critical Boost, which increases your critical hit chance by 20% for 6 seconds. Triple Shot, each arrow deals 50% physical damage to the enemy. The last arrow reduces the enemy's magic defense by 5% for 3 seconds. Poison Cloud, cast poison in a 5-meter radius for 3 seconds, dealing 175% physical damage to the enemy. Additionally, enemies in the poison area take 10% physical damage per second. The fired arrow deals 140% physical damage to the enemy. If the web captures the enemy, it poisons them, dealing 10% physical damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. Power Shot deals 200% physical damage to the enemy. If the effect of Critical Boost is active, this effect is removed and the damage is increased by 50%. Rapid Fire deals 220% physical damage to the enemy. Explosive Trap, place a bomb on the ground and leap backwards. After 3 seconds, when the bomb explodes, all enemies within a 5-meter radius take 350% damage and your speed is increased by 20% for 5 seconds. And Ultimate Focus, instantly reduce the cooldown of Bow Skill 2, Bow Skill 6, Bow Skill 9, and Bow Skill 10 by 10 seconds and increase physical attack by 20% for 3 seconds. Very interesting that there isn't 2 ultimate skills to be split between the different professions. Very curious on how they plan to navigate that. The second class is called Double Axe, which is one I'm very interested in so far. The Double Axe class is made up of warriors who can expertly wield 2 great axes. This class is known for their ability to deliver powerful, crushing physical attacks and can overwhelm enemies with devastating blows. The subclasses are Bloodmaster and Berserk Stormax, which is 2 badass names, I'm just going to say that right now. Bloodmasters represent a subclass of Double Axe. These warriors use their axes to inflict wounds and bleeding effects on their enemies. Bloodmasters bleed their enemies, weakening them over time and causing them to bleed to death. The Berserker Stormax represents another subclass of Double Axe class. These warriors use their great axes to deliver powerful and swift attacks. Berserker Stormax deliver swift and devastating blows to their enemies and charge into the center of the battle. The first skill is known as Axe Cleave, deals 105% physical damage to the enemy, steals 5% from the damage dealt. Savage Slash deals 80% physical damage to the enemy. Life Reap deals 90% physical damage to the enemy. If your character's HP is below 25%, steals 7% from the enemy. Bloodthirst Strike deals 90% physical damage to the enemy, steals 5% of the damage dealt. Vortex Pull deals 110% physical damage to the enemy and pulls 2 random enemy players near the damaged target. Rapid Escape retreats quickly from the enemy. Double Axe Strike deals 40%/60% physical damage to the enemy successively. Fury Combo deals 20%, 40%, 50%, and 65% physical damage to the enemy successively. If the final hit lands on the enemy, increase your physical attack by 2% for 3 seconds. Powerful Smash deals 90% physical damage to the enemy. I feel like this one should have a stun. Triple Axe Fury deals 30%, 40%, and 50% physical damage to the enemy successively. Also, this has a chain combo, which is pretty cool. Rampage deals 135%, 150%, and 165% sequential physical damage to the enemy. If used after Dual Axe Skill 7, deals extra 40%, 50%, and 60% physical damage. If used after Dual Axe Skill 8, your physical attack increases by 10% for 5 seconds. And then we have Destruction Wave, which I assume is the ultimate possibly, or maybe Rampage, deals 40%, 80%, and 130% physical damage to the enemy successively. It doesn't seem like they may have all the skills that go with both subclasses. This one feels like it was mainly blood, but maybe it is half and half on this one, who knows. But for the next class, we have ourselves the Dagger, which is actually dual daggers. The Dagger class is made up of warriors who skillfully wield fast and sharp daggers. This class is known for their ability to deliver swift and devastating physical attacks and can quickly overwhelm their enemies. The first subclass is called Deathblade. These warriors wield their daggers quickly and deliver swift blows to the enemy. The Deathblade deals fast and sustained damage to their enemy, and their speed gives them an advantage. The second subclass is the Shadow Stalker. These warriors use their daggers to inject poison into their enemies, rendering them invisible until they are destroyed. I'm not sure what that means, but that'll be interesting to see in the skills in a second here. Shadow Hunters or Shadow Stalkers poison their enemies and attack them with stealthy strides, delivering sharp blows from behind their foes. The Deathblade knocks down enemies with swift strikes, while the Shadow Stalker uses poison to damage the enemies and exploits stealth. Very interested to see if we're talking about permanent stealth and to see how this class gets balanced. First skill of the daggers is called Quick Stab, deals a total of 125% physical damage to the enemies. Shadow Pierce deals 125% physical damage. Blade Dance deals a total of 220%, which by the way, these number breakdowns here I think are all different attacks, so you can kind of see how fast this class is supposed to be going and how many attacks there are per skill. Vanish retreats quickly from the enemy and increases speed by 50% for 5 seconds. Poison Stab deals 110% physical damage to the enemy and poisons them for 5 seconds. Poisoned enemies take 10% physical damage per second. And I do like that last affix. If a player dies from this ability, your character becomes invisible for 3 seconds. Then we have Invisible Strike. Your character becomes invisible for 5 seconds. Taking damage will make you visible again. Additionally, the first attack while invisible will reveal your character. I think if we're only able to choose one, I'd take Concealed Presence on this one. Then we have Rapid Flurry, deals a total of 175% physical damage to the enemy. Lethal Ambush deals a total of 200% physical damage to the enemy. Deadly Surprise deals 170% physical damage to the enemy. Frenzied Blades deals a total of 230% physical damage to the enemy. And if your character is invisible, the first attack dealt deals an extra 90% physical damage. Deathly Cascade deals a total of 360% physical damage to the enemy. And Ultimate Assassination, which deals a total of 375% physical damage to the enemy. Now, I'm not sure how mobile we're going to be able to be and how easy it's going to be to get to your target, but one thing I can kind of predict just by looking at this class and by looking at the staff skills, how we have an Ice Mage, I think the dual daggers are going to need some kind of Shadow Step or Backdash in the future, to be viable in PvP especially. Next up, we've got ourselves the Staff. The Staff class is made up of warriors who are skillful wielding the magical arts. With their magical abilities, this class can cast a variety of spells and perform both offensive and supportive roles in battle. The first subclass is Frost Mage, which I briefly mentioned before. These warriors can use their staffs to master ice spells, slowing and freezing their enemies with freezing spells. The second subclass is Fire Mage. These warriors use their staff to master their flaming spells and unleash magical fire attacks on their enemies. Flame Mages inflict great damage by dealing area of effect to enemies. And for their skills, the first one is called Arcane Blast, deal 80% magic damage to the enemy. The second one is called Magic Vortex, which creates a 10-meter radius around the current location for 3 seconds. Enemies touching this area take 7% magical damage per second for 5 seconds. We also have Frost Nova, perform an attack with the 5-meter radius at the selected location, deal 100% magic damage to enemies in the area. It also freezes enemies for 1 second. Then we have Mystic Retreat. Retreat quickly from the enemy and activate a shield that negates up to 40% incoming physical damage for 4 seconds. Fire Path, which creates a fire corridor 7 meters long for 3 seconds. Enemies touching this corridor instantly take 130% magical damage. By the way, these spells sound really fun. I'm really liking this so far. Elemental Zone, which creates a 6-meter radius around the current location for 3 seconds. Enemies touching this area instantly take 110% magical damage and take 5% magical damage per second for 5 seconds. And then we have Snow Orb, sends a snowball to the enemy, dealing 115% magic damage and freezing them for 1 second. Enemies touching the traces left by the snowball are slowed by 15% for 5 seconds. We also have Mana Zone, creates a 5-meter radius at the current location for 5 seconds. Enemies in this area take 20% magic damage per second for 5 seconds. Fire Shield, which allows you to leap forward and open a fire shield for 3 seconds. During this time, your character takes no damage. Which is a very interesting skill, actually. I think if you're really good with the mage and you know what skill is coming for you, I think you could actually outplay a lot of people by using this correctly. Although I do kind of wish that there was an ice affix for this, like one that would allow you to, let's say if you get attacked during the shield's use, you're able to release a blast of ice around you that freezes any targets nearby for a short amount of time. Something like that would be really cool, in addition to also turning this from a fire shield into an ice shield. Next, we've got Arcane Field, which creates a 10-meter radius at the current location for 5 seconds, instantly dealing 150% magical damage to enemies within. Additionally, enemies touching this area take 10% magic damage per second for 10 seconds. Then we have Sanctuary, creates a 5-meter radius at the target location for 5 seconds. While in this area, your characters and allies take no damage, which again looks like an extremely powerful skill if you use it right. And last but not least, Meteor Strike, which performs an attack within a 6-meter radius at the selected location, dealing 220% magic damage to enemies in the area. And also I noticed the chain effect that if you use after the Fire Shield ability, enemies are knocked down. Next up, we've got ourselves the Warhammer. 2 subclasses as always. The first one is the Strengthener. These warriors use their magic to strengthen and support their teammates. Slow Devastators deal high damage to enemies, but their attacks are slower and their strikes are more effective. The skills start off with Hammer Bash, which deals 80% physical damage to the enemy. We have Crushing Blow, which deals 170% physical damage to the enemies. Battle Roar, which increases your own and group's physical attack by 10% for 1 minute. If they're going for what I think they're going for with this class and just in general, I think this buff needs to last at least 10-20 minutes or something like that. I don't think anybody wants to sit there every single 60 seconds and reapply this thing during the entire fight. Or every minute and 20 seconds if you get the extended effect affix. We have Triple Hammer Strike, which deals 40%, 50%, and 60% physical damage to the enemy in a sequence. Also, another criticism I have for this class so far, we're not done yet, but I'm seeing a severe lack of stuns so far. I think you need to have a decent chunk of that for this class to be viable. Then we have Swift Backstep, retreats from the enemy and increases magic defense by 10% for 5 seconds. Another thing here, I don't think we should really be retreating with a class like this, and because some of the other classes also have an ability like this, we should really have a charge for weapons like this one. Mighty Ground Pound deals 20%, 40%, and 70% physical damage to the enemy in a sequence. After the attack, your speed increases by 15% for 3 seconds. Defensive Surge deals 30%, 50%, and 60% physical damage to the enemy in a sequence. And on the final hit, increase your own and allies' physical defense in the area by 10% for 5 seconds. Tremor Smash, which deals a total of 170% physical damage to the enemy. Pushback, which deals 30%, 40%, 60% physical damage to the enemy in a sequence. And finally, we're getting ourselves a stunning affix here. Freezing Strike, which deals 20%, 30%, 50%, and 70% physical damage to the enemy in a sequence and freezes them, which is great. We're getting some decent crowd control on this one. Would still like to see at least 1 or 2 more stuns that players can use for this class though. Cleansing Slam, which deals 250% physical damage to the enemy, removing negative effects from yourself and allies in the hit area, which also prevents them from receiving negative effects for 10 seconds. And then we have Final Judgment, which lets you deal 250% physical damage to the enemy. Now, I do like that this can combo with pushback to knock the player down, but I'm very curious as to why Cleansing Slam has just as much physical damage as this one, and how you can get even more physical damage based on the points you put into Cleansing Slam. It almost feels like this should be the ultimate skill instead of Final Judgment, if Final Judgment is considered an ultimate skill. Next, we've got ourselves the Staff of Life, which I will be analyzing very carefully. This class is known for their ability to heal their allies and gain control over life energy. The first subclass is the Healer. These warriors use their Staffs of Life to heal their teammates and keep them alive in battle. Healers are tasked with maintaining and revitalizing the team's health. The second subclass is Magic Warden. These warriors use their Staff of Life to both use magical attacks on their enemies and weaken them with debuffs. So for the skills, we've got the first one, which is Healing Field, which creates a 6-meter radius at the current location for 4 seconds. Every second, your characters and allies regenerate 9% HP, while the enemies take 15% magic damage. Already off to a start where I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out in a real battle. 9% is a lot. Magic Silence, which lets you deal 140% magic damage to enemies. Additionally, enemies cannot use skills for 1 second. Life Infusion only adds 30% HP to the target ally. I'm pretty sure they mean just heals them. Healing Ground, which creates a 10-meter radius at the selected area for 6 seconds. While in this area, your character and allies regenerate 8% HP every second. Toxic Escape, which leaves a poison at the current location for 5 seconds and retreats. Enemies touching this poison have their magic defense reduced by 5% for 5 seconds. Curse Field, which creates a 5-meter radius around the current location for 5 seconds. Enemies in this area take 15% magic damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Defensive Blessing creates a 10-meter radius around the selected area for 5 seconds. Your character and allies within this area gain 10% physical defense and 10% magic defense for 40 seconds. Speed Zone, which creates a 10-meter radius at the selected location for 5 seconds. Your character and allies within this area gain a 20% speed boost for 20 seconds. Weakness Zone, which creates a 5-meter radius at the selected location for 3 seconds. Enemies touching this area have their magic and physical defense reduced by 10% for 5 seconds. Drain Field, which creates a 10-meter radius around the selected location for 3 seconds. Enemies within this area have their healing reduced by 20% for 10 seconds. Resurrection, which revives the targeted ally with 10% HP and 5% MP. Also like the chain effect on that one, although I'm a little confused why we don't have mass resurrection, because I think we're going to be getting into a lot of big fights in this game. But I'm interested to see the next one, which is Skeleton Warrior. Summons a Skeleton Warrior cursed with dark magic, deals magic damage to the enemies based on your magic attack. It targets the enemy you start attacking and can be fixed to any point with the magical spell. The Skeleton Warrior also disappears after 30 seconds. Now, I'm surprised to see that we have the Skeleton Warrior skill to begin with, more so that it's on the life skill tree, but I'm very interested to see what the cooldown might be on this one, and again, I'm very interested to see if we get a mass resurrection spell, because I think it's going to be needed. As for the other healing spells we've got, I think some of these are really strong. Something I'm really curious about is to see if these healing grounds will stack, and also if they're talking about baseline HP, like you'll just increase somebody's HP by 30% with life infusion, and it's not scaling off of your magic damage, then I think there might be cases where it might be very hard to kill someone, so we're going to have to see how this balances out. But at least if anything, they're leaning in the direction where it's too strong instead of too weak, which I think is a little bit better. Next weapon tree is going to be Crossbow. 2 subclasses, we've got Sharpshooter and Assault Masters. Sharpshooters use their crossbow skillfully to snipe enemies from a distance, dealing high damage to their targets in the process. Assault Masters are more fast and effective with their shots. These warriors rapidly fire their crossbow, dealing rapid damage to the enemies, and Assault Masters focus on the fast-paced nature of combat and respond quickly to their enemies. The first skill is called Piercing Bolt, deals 110% physical damage to the enemy. Second skill is Explosive Shot, which deals 170% physical damage to the enemy. Third one is Magic Shield, which increases your physical defense by 10% for 4 seconds. The next one is Pushback Bolt, which doesn't say that it pushes him back, but it deals 120% physical damage to the enemy. Then we have Quick Escape, which lets you retreat quickly to distance yourself from the enemy. Final Blow, which deals 110% physical damage to the enemy. If the enemy's HP is below 50%, this damage becomes 150%. Eagle Bolt, the fired arrow deals 90% physical damage to the enemy. The eagle that follows the arrow deals 110% physical damage to the enemy. Dragon Shot, I like the sound of this one. The flying baby dragon deals 160% physical damage to the enemy. Also notice that it's got an interesting affix, Bane of Bosses, which lets you deal an extra 100% physical damage to the bosses. Area Bomb, which lets you create a 5-meter radius area that explodes after 3 seconds, dealing 130% damage to enemies within. Defense Breaker deals 170% physical damage to the enemy and reduces their physical defense by 10% for 4 seconds. Frozen Combo, the fired arrows consecutively deal 180% and 200% physical damage to the enemy, and if the enemy hit is frozen, they take an extra 50% and 60% physical damage. Also has a stunning impact affix, which looks pretty good. Then we also have Triple Bolt, which deals 140%, 160%, and 180% physical damage to the enemy. And it's also got some pretty strong looking affixes on this as well. This looks like it definitely could be an ambush ability inside of a snow biome, because you got Arctic Annihilation. That looks crazy right there. After this, we've got ourselves the Sword and Shield class, which I have heard that they may not have a lot of defensive abilities in this one, so I'm very interested to see how this one turns out. The Sword and Shield class is a class of warriors known for their superior defensive skills in battles, specializing in melee combat. This class is equipped with strong armor and durable shields, and they use both shields and swords to effectively defend and attack their enemies. The first subclass is Guardian. They are the defenders of the battlefield and have a mission of protecting their teammates. Guardians are at the forefront of the battle thanks to their high stamina and ability to minimize damage from their enemies. The second subclass is Swordmaster. They strike swiftly and sharply, dealing high damage to their enemies. Swordsmen have the ability to wield a sword one-handed and shield, and combine skills and speed in their attacks. The first skill is called Guardian Strike, which deals 90% physical damage to the enemy and reduces their physical defense by 2% for 2 seconds. The second one is Defender's Bash, deals 90% physical damage to the enemy and reduces their magic defense by 3% for 2 seconds. Already noticing that on both of these they aren't that impressive, but with the affixes it's a little bit more useful. But when you're talking about only 2 seconds, there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do in that time frame. The next skill is called Riposte Slash, deals 100% physical damage to the enemy and creates a bleeding effect that deals 10% damage per second for 3 seconds. Then you have Chain Pull, throws a chain forward 10 meters, pulling the enemy towards you. Upon contact, the chain deals 120% physical damage and reduces their speed by 10% for 3 seconds. Shielded Assault, which deals 120% physical damage to the enemy. Sword Frenzy, which deals 140% physical damage to the enemy. Warrior's Whirl, which performs a 5-meter radius area strike, dealing 90% physical damage to enemies. Frost Barrier, which creates a 5-meter ice wall that absorbs all incoming damage for 4 seconds. Enemies touching the wall are frozen for 2 seconds. Shield Slam, which deals 180% physical damage to the enemy with the shield strike and stuns them for 1 second. Swift Retreat, which swiftly moves you backwards to create distance from the enemy. Again, on melee, I'm not sure why we're going with retreat skills on the warrior classes. The ranged ones have one too. In my opinion, I'm thinking Sword and Shield is one of the classes we should definitely have a charge for. Cyclone Strike, which performs a 5-meter radius area strike. Enemies inside the area take 110% physical damage and enemy players are knocked down. And then lastly, we've got Devastating Blow, which deals 240% physical damage to the enemy, and if it's used after the Shield Slam skill, it deals an additional 120% physical damage. That's pretty crazy, that's a lot of damage right there. But yeah, right away, I'm immediately noticing what people are talking about. There's not a whole lot of defensive skills here at all. We do have more crowd control in this class than what we were seeing from the Warhammer, which is disappointing because I think Warhammer should have more CC than anybody, but there's no taunts here, and there's a severe lack of damage mitigation, so I think they definitely need to change this one up a bit. And something that came to my attention in the middle of recording this is that on their closed beta roadmap, they have a section talking about skills and weapons, and they say that for each of the weapon types, there's going to be over 100 active skills and 300 passives. So clearly there's going to be a lot more than what we're seeing here, so take all this with a grain of salt. However, I will say if these skills will also be involved or will be an accurate representation of each of the weapons, then there's definitely some changes that could be made and some criticism to give. Second to last one we're going to go over is the Lancer or Spearman. These warriors use long spears skillfully to strike effectively against their enemies. Lancers neutralize their enemies with piercing attacks and resist their attacks while taking the lead in battle. I'm assuming this in itself is one of the subclasses because the second one listed here is Valkyrie, which is a subclass of the Spearmen known for both offense and support in battle. Valkyries deal high damage against their enemies while also assisting themselves or their allies by keeping the enemies at bay. For the skills, we're starting off with Piercing Jab. It deals 130% physical damage to the enemy. Additionally, deals an extra 10% physical damage as piercing damage. Deadly Thrust deals 130% physical damage to the enemy. Swift Evasion retreats quickly from the enemy and increases all piercing damage by 200% for 4 seconds. Alright, you're really starting to bug me with these retreat skills. I'm actually a little extra bugged because you get a short damage boost, but this skill is going to cause you to move away from the enemy. Essentially, what you're going to have to do is turn yourself around mid fight, hopefully that part's smooth at least, and then pop the skills so that you retreat in the direction of your enemy, and then you can actually make use of this 4-second buff. I really think other than daggers, maybe one of the other ones, the melee one should really have charge moves instead of retreats. Actually, I'm hoping this might just be a translation error because some of the descriptions weren't exactly clear. They seemed a little rushed through, so that's my hope, is that we're actually dealing with mobility skills that make sense. I could see the dagger skill needing both the backdash and a like shadow step or charge ability that allows them to get behind their enemy quickly. I think that'd be the only exception, but these other melee classes having these retreat skills, it doesn't make any sense because a lot of the range classes also have them. And on top of that, if I'm going to retreat from you as a melee user, that's just going to be horrible for me because I'm just creating more distance and allowing you to get your hits off. Anyway, we got the next skill called Spear Lunge, deals 150% physical damage to the enemy. Warrior's Rally, which creates an area that boosts the allies' physical attacks by 5% for 5 seconds. And also some of the buffs really need to have their timers increased. 2, 3, 5 seconds, that's a really short amount of time, especially depending on the cooldown. Need to give a skill like this at least 20 to 30 seconds in my opinion. Or you could have it be like a standard MMORPG raid-wide buff where it could last for up to 10, 20 minutes or an hour. We next have Life Drain, which I do like. Steals 2% HP from enemies within the area. Curious about this one as well. Like if you steal from 14 people, does that mean you're going to get 28% health back or you're just going to get the standard 2%? Next up, we have Triple Pierce. Deals 60%. 80%, 100% physical damage to the enemy successively. Additionally, deals an extra 10%, 20%, 30% physical damage as piercing damage. Stuns the enemy for 1.5 seconds on the final hit. We next have Rapid Poke. Deals 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, and 80% physical damage to the enemy successively. Mighty Impale deals 140% physical damage to the enemy. Area Control creates an area that deals 50% damage per second for 5 seconds. Enemies hit by the final hit area are frozen for 1.5 seconds. Whirlwind Spear deals 80%, 100%, 120%, and 140% physical damage to the enemy successively. Also, if used after the Rapid Poke skill, there's a 25% chance to double these damages. And then we have Ultimate Skewer. I might actually go Spear at this rate. Deals a total of 300% physical damage to the enemy. And then last but not least, save one of the most popular ones for last, we've got Two-Handed Sword, or Longsword according to the description. The Longsword class is made up of warriors skillfully wielding large and heavy longswords. This class is known for their ability to deliver powerful, crushing attacks and can overwhelm their enemy with devastating blows. The first subclass is called Strongsword. They strike slowly and sharply, dealing high damage to their enemies. The Devastator is the second subclass. These warriors use their great longswords to damage their enemies with stunning and devastating attacks. Devastators are particularly effective against vulnerable targets. For the skills, we've got ourselves Mighty Swing, deals 130% physical damage to the enemy. Crippling Cut, which deals 120% physical damage to the enemy and reduces the enemy's magic and physical attack by 5% for 2 seconds. Berserker's Fury, a sword strike which deals a total of 140% physical damage to the enemy. Retreat Guard, I swear I'm going to blow a gasket, retreats quickly from the enemy and activates a protective shield for 2 seconds, reducing incoming physical damage by 10%. Okay, why would you even have a skill like this on the two-handed class? Come on. Power Surge gains an effect that doubles the damage with any skill for 5 seconds and slows the enemy by 25% for 2 seconds. Very interesting. Let's come back to that later because that sounds like it has one-hit kill potential. Ground Smash deals 130% physical damage to every enemy in the area and knocks down a maximum of 2 enemy players within the area. Triple Slash, the first sword strike deals 70% damage, the second sword strike deals 90% physical damage, the third sword strike creates a bleeding effect that deals 10% damage per second to the enemy for 3 seconds. Then we got Warlord's Rage, sword strike that deals a total of 190% physical damage to the enemy, Piercing Thrust deals 180% physical damage to the enemy, Combo Strikes, which successively deals 30%, 40%, 50%, and 70% physical damage to the enemy, which is also about 380% with the double damage skill that we've got in the tree, not counting for any affix here or additional points. Blade Storm, oh no. Sword strike that deals 340% physical damage to the enemy and has a stunning affix or a 60% one that can bump that up to 400% aka 800, and then Fatal Flurry, which lets you deal 90%, 100% and 120% physical damage to the enemy. Which, yeah, okay, you would kill somebody in one combo 100%, because if you have Blade Storm, and then you get the groundbreaking finish affix, which knocks the target down. Then you pop Fatal Flurry, and you're still using the double damage skill. Like, so assuming the double damage would last for both of these skills, then the Fatal Flurry is going to deal an extra 150% physical damage with each sword strike if the enemy is knocked down. On top of the double damage, you're dead. I just want to see if anybody could possibly survive this, with especially with not having any mitigation skills on the sword and shield. I'd be very curious. This is probably the most overpowered class I've seen here so far, but just for one testing phase, I really want to see how this works. You guys know my thoughts for the rest of this. There's definitely some tweaks that need to be made. I'm very curious to see if all of these skills will make it into the next beta. Also, of course, we didn't see any passive skills, so that's going to be interesting to see as well, how that gets implemented into the game. The Hunter, for example, mentioned being able to have control over a beast, but there weren't any beast skills available in that chart. So we'll have to see how this goes. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this stuff in the comments below, and I will catch you on the next one.